if you can't recognize these titles, it's because they're not really titles. But they are. Y'all, I want to talk about video games. Haven't gotten to do that yet. Because it never really seemed important. Never seemed relevant. To bringing up my views and opinions on video games. Now, I'll be honest. My kind of video games have a story. A really good story. However, I don't play a lot of video games, so there may be some video games on there that aren't so much story, or they have a story, but, and I'm talking about Portal, it is really just a lot of puzzles. And I'll just be honest with you, I'm not really a video game player. More of a video game watcher. You know the way, growing up, you were either waiting for it to be your turn or you were playing the whole time because you're so good at the game? My brother was the last one. I'm the first one. So, I accepted that role at a certain point, and then YouTube came where people would play video games, and that was all we did. So instead of Nixon playing the game and just using the walkthrough as maybe an assist to move forward, we ended up just watching the video games only, which is bad because then the video game, which is meant to be active, is now passive. But still, video games are worth talking about. So I'm just going to read off the video games that I have seen to the end. Okay. Jack and Daxter series. I've seen that. Okay, not the fifth one. The fifth one was not Naughty Dog, so it doesn't count. Uncharted. I can say that I've seen some of it, but I know it better than I would know Last of Us. Spyro, Year of the Dragon. And Sword of Eternal Night. That one, I always get tired after the pirate ship. Which comes from the fact that every time we played that game, that was the hardest part to pass, so we just never really continued. For Eternal Night. For Year of the Dragon, it was fun to play through. Stanley Parable, also one I only saw on YouTube, but very cool, with the nearly infinite endings or possibilities. Portal. Portal 1, not so much. Portal 2 is the one I love the most because of the background story it builds. But Portal, of course, is still good. Detroit Become Human, which is recent. Watched it all. Rad Brad. A lot of them are Rad Brad, by the way. The Walking Dead. All of the seasons. Wolf Among Us. Although it was not, okay, that was not on YouTube. That was Nixon. I watched Nixon. And it was a very hard to watch game. But the music was awesome. So it doesn't leave me. Star Wars Force Unleashed. That was my brother. Life is Strange. That was either Rad Brad or just another random. I don't think it was Rad Brad. Anyways, Quantum Break. Once again, Rad Brad. And then Batman, which was me watching Nixon, but not so much. And Nixon actually played a lot more games like Journey and Last of Us. Those games he played, but I wasn't watching because I was not interested in them. Yeah. Don't know why. But then there's this vampire game that I really have to mention because it may or may not give some understanding as to why certain games I do avoid. Blade, it was a series, it was a video game series where this vampire he was a good vampire, but he would go after bad vampires. And it was the first game I ever saw, and that immediately impacted me. It was played by Flavian, my cousin. He was the first one, in my opinion, that I can remember, who introduced me to video games. Nixon did have video games at school, but I wasn't really aware of video games until visiting Flavian and Auntie Masha back in the day and playing Jack and Daxter. Yeah, but when he played Blade, I was so scared that night I couldn't really sleep. So I will say that it does, I am a little scared of things. But obviously, Walking Dead was on there. And okay, Last of Us I just wasn't interested in. It's just that I heard something about it and I was like, nah, I don't care so much about it. Or something. I don't know. It was just something that made me not interested. Like I have one reason in mind, but I feel like it was not just that. Anyways, why am I talking about all these video games I've watched or played, kind of, but mainly watched? It's because I recently came across the commercial during Super Bowl for Far Cry New Dawn. And it looked like a really good story. Very different from any time I would hear Far Cry, I'm seeing shooting, which, if you haven't noticed, is not on my list. I don't have any shooter games, because to me that's really pointless. I want to play through a story. I want to be a part of a story. That's what I like about video games. But this one seemed to have a story, so I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I was just now watching, not just now, but I was watching a few, who knows? I was watching Far Cry New Dawn, and I was like, okay, the story is boring. What is up? So then I go to Far Cry reviews, and there were a lot of reviews about New Dawn being boring. Not a lot. Okay, one. I wanted to see who agreed with me. Confirmation bias. But there was one that was really in depth about how the origins of the Far Cry series was very controversial because it was like Grand Theft Auto with all the immorality that was being endorsed. But with the recent one, which was Far Cry 5, before New Dawn, with Far Cry 5, it raises a philosophical question, or really presents just a case for people to think about. Things that happen in their own backyard. Like religious extremism. Religious extremists, And I was like, I really like what they're doing there. And I mean, yeah, it shouldn't be played for kids. I mean, as great as a game it is, it's not something that kids can watch and really understand the weight of the game and what it's really trying to convey. Then it made me think, is it bad that those games can't be played by children? Are there games that can be played by children that still, make people think? And from the list that I have, not really. Every game has a little bit of violence, has a little bit of mature content. But then I'm thinking, how could we make something for kids, beyond just good versus evil, because that's kind of what happens most of the time. And yeah, that's where I'm at. I do want to say that Far Cry 5 really made me think. But in my efforts to know what kind of games can kids play, I'll be reviewing these games at some point. And just not reviewing them, but just giving you my opinion on the video games that I think are really good and why they're good, and maybe also where they're weak, because everything has a weakness, but it's important to acknowledge the good in them. But yeah, I hope you like video games. I think that they're a great tool, great use of technology for people to explore ideas. Yeah. right now, I'll be honest, I have some idea of what kind of game I would like to implement that is philosophical, but it is very, in my opinion, boring because it's not so fantastical. I mean, it's not really fantasy, but it does have the characteristic of exploration and adventure, in my opinion, and that's something that's important to me when judging a video game. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.